You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back, family, to the Storm Tracker podcast. Marcus Benjamin here representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to the website, CanesCounty.com, for free. Use the promo code Miami30, and also subscribe to this YouTube channel, live from Canes County. We're rolling into the second official visit weekend, and Miami has another loaded list of visitors coming to Coral Gables. So we need to kind of break down the visitors that came last week and, what we're hearing about those kids, and as well as the players that are coming in this week. And to break it down, I've got Brian Smith, who represents for the Locked On Network, who knows a lot about recruiting, but his guess is as good as mine as to who's next and how this Miami class will kind of shake out with so many top guys. Brian, we talked right before this podcast came on that 6 5-stars in 2 weeks have come to Coral Gables. What are your thoughts on just the amount of top-notch blue-chip players that are traveling to Coral Gables in the last 2 weeks?
I think Miami's trying to make a big swing. They know they got still another level they've got to get to talent-wise to reach their objective, and this is how you do it. They have spurned the idea that you just got to recruit local. They are a complete national program, and to be honest, that's what Georgia has done. That's what Texas has done. That's what SC has done, etc. So I get it. Now the question is, can they reel in any of these guys? Tristan Keys is a kid I'm fascinated with. I've seen him before. I know you have too. Guys like him, that's really important. Obviously, Jackson Cantwell's in the boat. But now can you get some of these kids that they probably don't lead for, like Lamar Brown. They probably don't lead for a few of the other kids. But at one point, they didn't lead for Jackson Cantwell either. And as the saying goes, If they don't visit, you're not going to get them. So I think Miami's doing the right thing. And they've got to steal one of these 5-star kids in addition to getting somebody like Samori Wingo or something like that to have a top 5 class. We'll talk about that. But I think this is a guy that flat out understands it from a broad perspective, talking about Cristobal. We need more talent, and we still have a ways to go. So he's not putting his foot off the gas. He's putting it to the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. Mario Cristobal and his staff have done a tremendous job just getting these kids to Coral Gables. It is really kind of the first step usually for a lot of kids before their commitment. It's really just to get them to the campus for an official visit. So Miami's done really well in that regard. Like I said, 6 5-stars in the past couple of weeks is pretty impressive. Tristan Keys, Jackson Cantwell, Lamar Brown, Derek Cooper, Anthony Tank Jones. I think I got everybody there. I'm not sure, but there's just so many of these 5-star guys. I mean, and then a ton of 4-star guys as well. You had a total of 17 last week. I think we're at 15 this week. So over 30 recruits in Coral Gables, and we're just halfway through, Brian. We're just halfway through, and then you got 2 more weeks of official weekend visitors coming up. So before we kind of get into the offensive line class, because I do want to kind of talk about this O-line class. I do want to talk about the receivers as well as who is next, and if Miami can get to a top 5 class. I think right now they're sitting at let's see, I think 8th as far as class is concerned. Actually, no, they dropped down to 11th according to Rivals.com, but that is due to rise with the amount of guys that are coming to Coral Gables. Of all these guys, who do you think is like the must get recruit out of the guys from last week and this week? Who's the guy that Miami needs to put at the very top of their priority list to commit to the U?
Well, I know everybody's going to say Tristan Keys, but that's a very difficult one. He's a South Mississippi kid committed to LSU. There is an interesting development with him. I don't know if you saw this, but yesterday he announced that he is going to be an Adidas athlete.
Yeah,
Now,
I did
LSU's
see
been
that.
Nike pretty much my whole life, if not my whole life. I believe A&M's Adidas and Miami is Adidas. I don't know if that'll factor in. And not every kid that signs one of these kind of deals goes to a school that is, which is confusing to me. But I think it's something to consider. I'm sure the Adidas people would much rather him be at Miami than LSU. I mean, it's a branding thing. So I don't know how that works, but that makes it fascinating. But I believe that was his third visit to Coral Gables. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marcus. That's
Yes, third visit to Coral Gables.
so. I mean,
Third in as many months too. The third in
yeah,
3 months.
yeah. So he's interested. He's interested. How much? So I don't know, because all these elite kids, they're getting money to take visits. Let's just cut to the chase. But you're still not going to take three to a school if you're not really interested, in my opinion. So I get it, but now that again, they've got to close. Ironically, wide receivers, the spot they have not closed on over the last few years, which you think of Miami, that's should be low hanging fruit. It's just been ironic. They've been really unlucky coming in like second and third for some key guys. It is what it is, but this might be their guy to get him over the top because I think he's a immediate impact, make it happen from day one kind of guy. And he's a great kid too, really competitive, and he's route running, length, speed, competitive nature, all those things. He's an elite player. I would say him, but a guy I just want to throw him in because I think he's slept on is Samorian Wingo.
Yeah.
Not just because he's another really good receiver. He's an in-state kid. He plays just south of Jacksonville. They don't get a ton of exposure where he's at. That kid should probably be ranked higher in some ways. But anyway, I think those are a couple of the guys. They got to get an elite receiver. I think that's the biggest thing for Miami because they're so green at the wide receiver position, and they just brought in all those transfers. They kind of had to. But they've got to get an impact receiver. Keys is the easiest pick for this.
Yeah, receiver's kind of interesting for Miami. I mean, you mentioned Keys and Wingo, who I absolutely love. South Carolina is in the race for Wingo as well as Alabama as well. So we'll see how all of that shakes out as far as his recruitment goes. Messiah Hampton, he's a guy, we talked about before air as well, out of Rochester, who's very, very interested in Miami, Syracuse, and Oregon. And Miami seemed like the top teams for him. With this wide receiver class. So it will be interesting. Yeah, I see your point as far as like Miami missing out on really top guys in the past couple of cycles, actually. But they still got some pretty good talent in the past couple of years, Josh Moore and of course Malachi Tony, who, I expect to make an immediate impact this season. But Miami does swing for the fences, and that's what I like about Miami. They swing for the fences when it comes to these recruits. They believe they can get any and everybody, and a point that you made also before we got on here was the fact that Miami still not a playoff team, and I think these kids really want to see Miami take that next step and take it to the next level, because even if they have, players commit, Miami still has to have a solid season. They have all of the opportunity to have a solid season with teams like Florida and Notre Dame on the schedule, and of course Florida State and others. So the opportunity is definitely there for them to really show that they can win and be competitive on the next on another level. But we have yet to see it. We haven't seen Miami in the playoff. Yeah, it just expanded last year. But I think playoffs is kind of the minimum for this team to keep these kids and also kind of take this program to the next level on the field and with recruiting. So, any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think that's the key. I think summer is one thing. Getting kids to commit is another. And then this is where Mario excels with his staff. If they don't land a kid, they continue to pursue them. But to your point, Marcus, it's a lot easier to pursue kids that are committed elsewhere when you're kicking the crap out of the competition. Miami has been the ultimate roller coaster over the first 3 years that Cristobal has been the head man. it's time to see more consistency and another level up, meaning they need to show on game day that this is a well-oiled machine. He's always going to get hammered for the Georgia Tech game a few years ago. That's unavoidable. But if you beat Notre Dame or you beat Florida or you beat, like, it's just obvious that everything was consistent. Everything was just the way it's supposed to be. You're not questioned. That'll help them tremendously with some elite recruits, especially kids that aren't as familiar with Miami. Like you and I were talking before, their official visit list is as national. Like Messiah Hampton's from upstate New York. Like it's just random where they have kids from coming for visits. Texas, Louisiana. It could be a kid from North Georgia. It could be anywhere. The kid that comes in, the next kid that comes is from 2,000 miles away from me. They're as national as it gets. So some of these kids are intrigued by Miami, but you can't tell me that the way they coach, the way they play this season isn't important. This is year 4. You kind of are who you are, but they need to fine tune now because they blew an opportunity last year. They got beat by Georgia Tech again, which is wild. And then they, of course, had 21-0 lead against Syracuse. I guarantee you they're getting hammered with negative recruiting because if I was another school, that's exactly what I would do. Why would you go play for this guy? They have to prove it on game day. So this summer, I think they're going to do well with recruiting. They're one of the 5 to 10 schools I think are going to make some moves. But to get over the hump for Mario and his staff to get those 5-star kids, I think it's about winning this fall. Not only to get them committed, to sign. Because everybody comes after 5 stars. Even if they commit to Miami or somebody else, you're going to keep recruiting that kid. So Tristan Keys, like if you start out 6-0 and beat Notre Dame and Florida, et cetera, you're going to keep his attention a lot easier. It's pretty simple.
Absolutely. If they do, I'm pretty sure Keys will take another visit to Miami during 100%. The season. One thing Cristobal has proven, even though he hasn't proven that, Miami is a legit playoff team yet, is that he can develop offensive line players. He's proven that at Oregon, with Penei Sewell, who, was the highest paid offensive lineman in the NFL, got that contract last year. And then now, you see Jalen Rivers from last year. Inez Cooper is definitely one of the players that they can, show that, hey, this guy was a 2-star basically type of player and now could be an NFL draft pick next season. And then, of course, Francis Mauanoa, they brought in him, obviously a 5-star guy out of IMG Academy, and he's well on his way to be a first-round pick next season as well. They like to build from the inside out, build from the trenches. That's kind of what you see from this staff. And this cycle, it's like, whoa, like, I mean, they could probably just, chill right now with their offensive line class and still be very, very good with, players like Joel Irvin, who I really like, Ben Congdon, who I like. They also have J.J. Sparks. They added Reese Woodrow as well. And, of course, the 5-star Jackson Cantwell, the number 1 recruit in the nation. But they've got their eyes set on other players as well, including Brett Collegier, that's set to visit this weekend, as well as Cannon Pickett. They're interested, very interested in him as well. Of course, the brother of Booker Pickett, who's currently on the Miami roster. When I think about this offensive line, though, class, Brian, it kind of confuses me a little bit because I'm like, how many guys are you going to take? Because right now they're sitting at, I believe, five guys right now. And, are they going to take 7 with Booker Pickett and Brett Collegier? And then it's very interesting that Brett Collegier is on the same official visit weekend with Jackson Cantwell. Because from what I understand, Collegier was being communicated that he was the number 1 player on their board. But then they took Jackson Cantwell. So that's kind of interesting to me that he's on that same official visit weekend with Cantwell. What are your thoughts on this offensive line class and the potential of it?
That's a great question. I'll address the Collegier thing first. I think that's for the interior offensive line. That's my guess. Breck is totally an offensive guard. He's really technically sound and he's a powerhouse. He loves to grind. Like I've seen him, and so have you. When we saw that 5-on-5 tournament earlier this year, like against the edge guys, when he's playing tackle, that's not his deal. But when he's inside, not many people get around him, and they don't really get a chance to run block, obviously, in 5-on-5s. It's just pass pro. His best work is going downhill, which is what Mirabal and Cristobal want. And he fits that to a T. Now, the other thing about Breck, this is a kid that's got Ohio State, North Carolina, and Michigan, and all these other schools after him. I don't know what the main deciding factor will be for him. He's originally from Colorado. I don't think the Buffaloes are heavily involved. I could be wrong unless something's changed. He's hard to figure out, but like he fits what Miami wants to do, running GT and just running some traps and basic power plays. And of course, Miami's running back room is just absolutely star-studded. So he fits it. I said a long time ago, I thought he would end up at Miami. I think that you could make a strong guess that Mirabal is the best overall coach / recruiter at the O-line spot in the country. I have a world of respect for him. But this is a guy, like, when's he going to make his decision? I think that's a big one. And then the other, Cannon Pickett, obviously, his brother plays for Miami, the same kind of deal. That's a legacy thing. It's an in-state player you'd love to have. You've recruited him for like 3 years. I get it. But when's he going to make his decision? Clemson's done a good job recruiting. Florida's done a good job. Miami, he's not going to go to Florida State. I know they were trying to get him back. They don't have any shot with him. It'll be Miami, in my opinion, or it will be Clemson. That's my guess. So we'll see. And him and Collegier are pretty good buddies. But the 7 is interesting too, because I said the same thing. At what point is too many? Like next year, you just going to take 2? Like how does that work? The only other thing I can figure is they're just going to process some guys out, or this will take care of itself naturally. Survival of the fittest, if you will, which I'm cool with. Some guys will leave because they ain't playing. And whichever guys take to Alex's coaching, which it's obvious, he was Penei Sewell's coach at Oregon, I think they're going to be just fine. So maybe the best, if they can get at least one of Collegier and Pickett, kind of hard to see them not having a top 3 national O-line class. If they get both, Marcus, I imagine it's number 1. Like all the kids they've taken before anybody asked, they're good. Like the kid they took from Orlando's probably got the least hype. I like Sparks. I think he could be a center or a guard. But like all of them can play. And again, because it's Mirabal doing the coaching and the evaluating, I'm good. So I like mass respect to Miami because historically O-line is their weakest link. Not that they've had a ton of problems with it, but like in the late 80s, early 90s, that was their biggest thing. You could rush the passer and stuff against them. Of course, that early 2000s team, that was a different deal. Their O-line was probably their strength. Now it's definitely their strength. Like, holy cow. This year, they should be in the Joe Moore Award competition, which is the top O-line in the country, handed out at the end of the season. And like I saw Maui Noah, as did you, at that competition, like he's ready to roll. He's 335 and looks lean. It's crazy. He might be the best right tackle in college football. They've got so many things to sell to these offensive linemen. Yeah, I think they're doing the right thing. And again, 7 seems like a lot, but as the saying goes, strike while the iron's hot, brother. Maybe that's just what they're looking at. And I'm cool with, like, if they think that's the best thing, I will go with Mirabal's judgment.
Yeah, they potentially could lose 4 starters from this offensive line.
That's a lot, brother.
Yeah, they could lose. Markel Bell has a chance. We already talked about Malanoa, Inez Cooper, and then the center Brockermeyer that they got from TCU. So they potentially lose the 4. So I understand. From a numbers standpoint, you kind of want to bring some guys in from a depth perspective. Another guy, though, that we haven't mentioned who could be added to this list, so it could be 8, is Ryan Merritt. Ryan Merritt is another guy, local guy, really big center, very, technically sound with his hands. He's a state champion wrestler. This is a guy that I don't think Miami should not take. I think they should definitely take him. I like Ryan Merritt more than a couple of guys that they already have committed. I like him a little bit better than JJ Sparks. I like him a little bit better than Reese Woodrow as well. And the fact that he's a local kid from South Ridge, which is just a few miles away from the University of Miami campus, I think that this is a guy that I think is a must take. To be honest, and Nebraska's in there as far as probably the top contender for merit, but I think they might be kicking themselves if they don't add him to the class. Now, what's your thoughts on him, just really quickly?
I love the fact that he's not just a wrestler, but you said it correctly, Marcus. He is a state champion wrestler. That sport is different, bro. Like some of my buddies were the nutsos that were cage fighters and all that stuff. Like their training and their dedication is different. And he does it in conjunction with football. The training for the two sports, believe it or not, it's quite a bit different. So he has to add weight, lose weight, and all that kind of stuff. He's dedicated. Those kinds of personalities tend to work out at the college level. I'm not saying he's going to come in and start at the U. I mean, I'm not stupid. It takes a couple of years, but it wouldn't hurt. And he could play guard or he could play center. Being the local kid, the political part of that, look, I know, as I said earlier in the podcast, Miami's made no bones about it. They don't recruit locally as much as some former staffs did, but they're trying to beat Texas. They're not trying to beat just Florida State. They're trying to beat everybody. So it is what it is. But if you can get a good player from Miami Southridge, by all means, knock it out. So there's two different ways to look at that. I don't know if they're pushing for him. What is your thought on that? Is Miami really pushing for his commitment, or are they just recruiting him? That's the question I have.
That's a very, very good question, the way you kind of posed it. I do think that they're recruiting him. I do think Alex Mirabal really likes him as well. I'm just not sure how high he is on their board.
That's what I mean.
I'm not quite sure. Like if he's, I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell you like how high he is or priority he is for Miami. I think he should be a high priority. Like I said, I like him better than a couple of guys that they have committed. As far as the interior guys, I just think he should be a take for Miami. But if they add Brett Colajay, it's kind of hard to see them, and a Cannon Pickett. It's kind of hard to see them add merit as well, because 7 seems like a lot, but 8 is definitely a lot of offensive linemen for a class.
Would one of the kids, there's no nice way to say this. Would one of the other kids drop out of the class? Do you think somebody would decommit possibly? Look, at some point, this is a numbers game. You're right. You're 100% correct.
Yeah, I do think so. I do think one of these guys will not end up in the class. That's no disrespect to any of the kids that are currently committed, but I do believe from a number standpoint. And then, I think kids and now agents, kind of make that decision as to, hey, we can go to this other school and, probably start right away, that type of thing, instead of waiting. Because if there's 8 guys in front of you and one of them is Jackson Cantwell, like you're likely going to be waiting for maybe 2 years until you're significantly playing. And a lot of kids don't want to wait, especially in this day and age of college football. You don't want to wait. There's 100 and some odd teams in FBS. One of those teams probably need a guard tackle, where you could start right away. So I think from a number standpoint, I think naturally one of these kids would probably drop off. Just like last year, I think it was TK Muex, a kid out of Jacksonville, ended up dropping from the class. So I think, Miami, I think, is just trying to load up as with as many talents as they can on this O-line, but I doubt they end up with 8 guys. But we'll see.
I agree.
Yeah. So like we've talked about, over 30 kids in this last 2 weeks, but no commits yet. No player has committed from these last 2 weeks. I know this is kind of a tough question. It's always a tough question, and it's a question that's posed to me as well. But who do you think is most likely to commit out of these 30 or some odd kids in these last 2 weeks?
Colajay would be up there. Cannon Pickett take his visit yet? Because he would
No.
be Cannon coming up. He's certainly high. Samari Wingo, any of the in-state kids. The one I'm curious about, and he's obtuse about trying to do interviews and whatnot. And that's Chauncey Cannon. I'd love to hear your take on that, because look, Miami's Achilles heel until otherwise proven is in the back end of the defense. Yeah. I mean, there's no politically correct way to say it. They were awful last year in that end. So that's a very big priority for them. So any DB I'd be curious about. After that, man, like you said earlier, they're after the big fish. And this is a national trend. These kids are getting money to take visits. So the days of knocking a kid out on visit 1 or 2 and they're done, it's not over with, but it's pretty rare. It's just not going to happen very much. So if that's the case, you got to play the long game, which Mario and his staff have done very, very well the last few years, to say the least. Don't worry about it if you're in Miami. Hey, we don't have what's going on. This is going on at Georgia. This is going on at Michigan. This is going on at Ohio State. This is going on at Texas. The kids are waiting because they're getting money on business, period. Yeah. So from June 20th to about July 10th, 12th, somewhere in there, and I'm not exaggerating when I throw this number out, there will be 300 plus kids just in that time frame commit to P4 schools.
That makes me nervous, Brian, because us in this industry, that means we're going to be busy, not sleeping.
Well, that's what I said. Like I cover all the people. There's no chance. Like I can do a podcast, but the 5 more kids have committed while I'm doing the podcast. It's just everybody wants their own day to shine. Like Tom Loy and different people that do those shows like 24/7 and different, like John does it for Garcia does it for Rival. They can't be everywhere at once. It's going to be wild. I don't know how they're going to do all of it. Yeah. That Hayes Fawcett guy for On 3, like his hands got to be ready to break doing all those edits. So, but it's going to be about a 25-day window where the vast majority of kids commit. There'll be a few that'll spread it out later July, early August, but not that many. Yeah. So Miami, I'm just going to make the prediction. I don't know exactly who, because their visit list is just insanely good. They will be one of the 5 teams that improve their roster the most from the P4 level in that time frame. Again, I know that you want specific names, and I'd love to know them too. But in the NIL era, trying to pick specific kids, you and I joke about this all the time at events when I run into you. It's almost impossible, because we have kids that tell us, hey, I'm probably going to this school or that school. We know where kids are going. And then 5 minutes before the announcement, you get a text like, this kid's not going there. Yeah. It happens all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, so, it happened with Jackson Cantwell. I mean, I think everybody in the entire nation thought he was going to Georgia until the day before. So yeah, recruiting it's a fun game, and it's a fluid process. Oh, yeah. It's something that just kind of changes, with the day. So we'll see how it all happens. Chauncey Cannon, I did talk to him over the weekend. Very kind of timid personality. He's very, low-key. Very, very, very low key. You could barely hear him talking, and I was right in front of him. Wow. Like he's that very low key type of guy. Couldn't really kind of gauge how much he really liked Miami. I mean, he definitely liked Miami, obviously. I mean, what kid doesn't say that they liked an official visit to Miami? They all say it. But as far as compared to a lot of other kids, I would say, I felt better about Messiah Hampton. I felt better about Keyshawn Stansel. I felt better about Brody Jennings, Samarian Wingo. Like when I talked to these kids right after their official visit, I felt a lot better about those kids than I did about Chauncey Cannon. And just to your point, his commitment date is July 5th or July 6th or something like that. And he's got a couple of visits that he's going to make. So I don't think he'll be the next one. But, you'd have to ask me that question after he has his last official visit, after, the June 20th weekend. Then we'll have a better gauge on kind of where he's at, maybe talk to his agent, kind of see where he's at with everything. The interesting one coming up soon, though, is Messiah Hampton. Messiah Hampton is making his decision June 13th, which is very different for these recruits, because like you said, these schools are going to be trying to entice these kids with money and maybe other things for them to get to commit, and he could take more visits. He said he is open to taking more visits as well. So I don't know if another school kind of pops up here, but it's interesting that his date is June 13th, next week or so. So yeah, it's really hard to really kind of say who is next, as far as who is going to commit to Miami, because we're in mid-June. We got a couple of more weeks to go. A lot of Miami commits are visiting this weekend. You got Jalen Waters, Jackson Cantwell, Darion Coleman. A lot of these guys, I think, are really just more solidifying their commitment. I don't see them wavering. As far as like when I talk to them, it doesn't seem like Waters is wavering at all. It definitely doesn't seem like Coleman is wavering at all. Cantwell seems pretty solid. We'll see after the weekend. Just how more solid he is with the U. But yeah, I think probably the most interesting visitor for this weekend for me is Brett Kolejay. And then Cannon Pickett as well. Cannon Pickett is visiting this weekend. You got Hezzy Kent. He's really, Miami doesn't have a tight end on the board yet. So that'd be interesting if they're able to get him out of Georgia. Braden Robinson is a really talented kid. I think he's leaning towards Notre Dame.
That's what I'm interested in too, because I don't hear anything about him in the last few weeks. Like it just got quiet.
Yeah, it has. I talked to him in the spring when he visited Miami. He really liked it, but was very kind of, calm and timid about it as well. He didn't want to reveal too much of kind of where he wanted to go. Even with Notre Dame being the assumed leader, he didn't want to, give anything away when it comes to that. Bryce Perry Wright is a very interesting visitor. The last time he bumped out Georgia for this visit to Miami.
That's intriguing.
So that, he's a Georgia guy out of Buford. So that is a very interesting guy. Of course, you have John Tavius Wyman, who flipped from Georgia. And you also have Tyreek Green, also from Buford, Georgia as well. So there's just a lot of interesting players that will visit this weekend. And like I said, I think the two offensive linemen, though, Cannon Pickett and Kolejay from IMG and Tampa Bay Tech, are the most intriguing for me.
What's your take on James Johnson?
Well, I feel like he came to Miami for a reason. I feel like he's left the West Coast of Florida to come over here for a reason. I think Miami has a very good chance to land him. I like him talent-wise. I think he's a very talented player. I think that Miami Northwestern team is absolutely loaded. They're probably the best team in South Florida. There's other great teams, like, of course, Chaminade and St. Thomas are, of course, going to be strong as well. But I think Miami Northwestern is the best public school in South Florida this year. I think Miami has a really good chance. I think at that position, you kind of want to get guys. You want to just kind of get them and lock them in, because though I would say that's one of those positions where you just got to get a good one, right? You have to get a good interior D lineman. And if you can get one from a powerhouse locally now, I think you throw whatever you can at him. From my conversation with him in the spring, he seemed interested, but didn't want to give away too much. I wasn't overwhelmed with how he felt about Miami, but Miami's definitely a contender for sure. But it's up in the air as far as where he goes. It'll be interesting to kind of get his feel of the official visit after he completes it on Sunday.
Yeah, that's the kid that I'm curious about. I've never met him. I don't really know much about his personality or anything else. I haven't talked to many people, been around him. And it's not a great year for defensive tackles nationally. Even Texas is like trying to dip into the state of Florida to get D tackles. So his recruitment could be wild. And I honestly don't know where he's going, but he is darn good. So Mr. Johnson's going to get a chance playing for Northwestern, obviously. He will be on full display right off the bat. I'm sure they're in that classic in South Florida the first weekend in some capacity. I don't know who they're playing, but we'll find out how good he is real quick, because nothing wrong with the west coast of Florida, but Northwestern's schedule is a whole different animal compared to what he was facing when he was in North Fort Myers. It's just not even the same stratosphere. So that'll be fun to see him turn loose a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. D tackles, it definitely seems like it's kind of a focus this weekend. You got James Johnson. You also have Freddie Wilson as well as Bryce Perry-Wright, which I mentioned earlier. So will be very interesting to see how Damian Lewis, the new interior defensive line coach for Miami, really kind of closes on these players that, some of which I believe he kind of just started recruiting for Miami. So be interesting to see how he closes on those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. If they can get that spot short up again, Miami's done a really good job of building their roster at defensive end in particular. It's insane. But D-tackle, there just aren't enough of them. So if you can just get at least one good one a year, you're pretty much ahead of the curve. Everybody wants 3 and 4, but it's not realistic. Even Bama didn't normally get that back in the heyday under Saban. So Miami's probably got a top 10 defensive tackle room in the country. Nobody really talks about that, but it's pretty good. So we'll see how they do this year, and I'm sure they're selling that to James too.
Yeah, Keyshawn Stansel, I do want to mention, like, of all of the visitors from last weekend, he seemed the most excited.
That's an important visit. That's a North Carolina kid. He was probably shocked by what he saw. He probably hadn't even been there before, if I was to guess. So that's awesome.
Yeah, he seemed the most excited. Like, leaving the weekend, I felt like if there was anybody who could possibly commit as a surprise, I would think it would be Stansel. But NC State definitely a major player for him. Kid out of North Carolina. Last question for you, Brian. Miami getting a top 10 class, top 1 class?
They should finish somewhere between 5 and 8, if I was to guess. Pretty much where they are now. There's just the difference between like number 7 and number 12 right now is about the difference between $1 and $1.05. You know what I mean? It's really close, and that's typically how it is. The kids we talked about today, like Cola Johnson, some of these, they're important. If they're going to get inside the top 5, I can't imagine they'd have to get at least 1, if not 2 more 5s. Tristan Key, somebody like that, to really move the needle. But they're in on so many kids. Like you and I both love Wingo, just as an example at wide receiver. It's kind of hard to see them outside of top 12. The only place they're really going to go from now is up, because the official visit list is so good. It's just math. You're going to get some of them. I just don't know which ones. If I did, I'd be rich making 20% living on the beach. But I don't have that kind of foresight. They've done a great job, though. If you're a Miami fan, you should be happy about the accumulation of talent and the official visits. That's all you can ask for at this point. And again, as Marcus so prominently stated, between like the 20th or so and after, it's going to be wild. Like he and I are not going to sleep. Those are the things that we know. And it's going to be very, very difficult chasing down all the rumors, because these kids are going to flip around and every, text you and like, did you hear this? No, I heard that. You know what I mean? Like that stuff is just real. Like these kids have tough decisions, but it will be a lot of fun.
Definitely will be a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun having you on this podcast, as always. Brian Smith, representing for the Locked On Network. Make sure you follow him at FBScout_Florida on X. Thanks for joining me today, and hopefully I'll see you again soon and talk about more Miami recruiting.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. That's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the website, CanesCounty.com, and also subscribe to this YouTube channel, live from Canes County. Also subscribe to this podcast on all platforms. Until the next episode.